Radio Free Los Angeles is sponsored by Private Trust Management Group on AM 870, The Answer.
Come in, Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
All right. Happy 4th of July to everybody. This is Mike Alexander, Radio Free Los Angeles. I'm happy that you could join us here tonight. I will be without Jonathan Wilson. Jonathan Wilson, my happy co-host here, is still vacationing back with family in Kentucky. He's into his second week here. I don't know. He may even try to call in. If he does, we'll see what he's doing back there. I can tell you one thing, it involves lots of bourbon and cigars. That's for one thing, and I've got deep Kentucky envy right now. In any event, we've got a great show for you guys tonight. If you'd like to participate, we'd love to hear from you. The telephone number is 866-870-5752. Now, tonight's lineup is going to be really good. Our major guest tonight is a fellow named Ed Ring. And yes, just like it sounds, R-I-N-G. Now, Ed is one of the smart guys. He writes and does research for the California Policy Center, which if you're not familiar with them, you should get to know them and subscribe to their newsletter because it really is required reading for anyone who wants to stay up to speed of what's going on in California. And he has had a number of recent articles on the Janus decision, which came down, not only on the Janus decision, but on all the whole range of issues that involve public employee unions and what they're up to here in the state. The Janus decision, as you know, came down last week, and it's a landmark decision which ended mandatory dues for public employees. Ed is going to come on to discuss how the corrupt public employee unions here in California are working with an equally corrupt California legislature to blunt the effect of that decision and to slow walk the implementation. I think you're going to be shocked as some of the things, shocked but not surprised, as they say, at the many things that the public employee unions are doing. Now, while we're waiting for Ed Ring to call in, I'm going to go back and cover some other really, really important news. I'm not sure if you're aware of it or not, but the initiative to repeal the California gas tax increase that was passed last year, that initiative has qualified and will definitely be on the November ballot. So if you want to reduce your tax bill by about $800 per year, you've got the right way to do it. And I want to give you the website there so that you guys can check out the events that are coming up. We at the California Taxpayers Union will be working with Carl DeMaio, who heads up Reform California, the leadership element here on this initiative. I want you to go to their website, which is simply entitled gastaxrepeal.org. I will repeat it, gastaxrepeal.org. Now that the initiative has qualified, they're going to be doing a number of events, and it's going to be starting with organizational events throughout the county. And that's going to be very important, actually, throughout the state, but there's going to be several events that we have going on here in the state of California, in the county of Los Angeles, that you're really going to want to know about. So if you'll go there and check it out, I think that you will be very happy about what's going on. Just go on there and click their events and what's going on. There's going to be an Orange County gas tax repeal organizing meeting. That's going to be in Irvine on Thursday, July 12th. Go to the website to check out for more details. There's going to be a similar organizing meeting on Thursday, July 12th in Bellflower. That's going to be on Bellflower Boulevard. Check the website for further details. And there will be an additional Orange County gas tax repeal organizing meeting on MacArthur Boulevard in Irvine. There'll be one in Palm Desert, some fundraisers. There's things going on up in the Bay Area if you happen to be getting this message. So we really highly encourage you to participate in that, because this is our chance to take back some freedom for ourselves and to get some money back in the pocket of everybody, really. But when you stop to think about it, this gas tax increase, not the underlying gas tax that we start off with, which was highway robbery in the first instance, but the increase that we had, that alone comes up to about $750 to $800 per year for the average family of four. Now, we will hear ad nauseum about the Latino family from every bureaucrat that there is. Well, the last time I checked, the average family of four here in the state is probably a Latino family, and those who purport to be representing them are hammering them with $800 additional tax per year. So don't believe all of this class warfare and special pleading. Don't allow them to divide us along racial lines or lines of national origin, ethnic, or whatever. They're just trying to steal from you. Remember, government as we know it is nothing but a fraud, a hustle, and a con. Now, that is a great lead-in to my guest, Ed Ring, who's going to talk about the masters of fraud, hustles, and cons. Ed, are you there?
How are you?
Hello, Ed. Mike here. It's great to hear from you. It's been a good week for you.
Well, it's been a good week for America. Fraud, hustle, and con is pretty strong words. I think that when it comes to some of the sources of corruption in state and local government, especially here in California, it's tempting to just say that categorically. It really is.
Well, yeah, it's your government, of course, is legitimate. None of us really dispute that. But as practiced, as implemented, it is rife. It is fraught with fraud, with hustles, with cons, and none is greater than the public employee unions and their practices. But we're going to look to you as one of the experts here. Ed, why don't you give our audience, first of all, a little background on yourself so they know what your areas of expertise are, who you write for, who you're affiliated with, because the things that you have to say should be as broadly read and heard as possible.
Well, sure. I spent most of my career in business. I spent 20 years in the private sector working usually as a CFO, often for startup companies. I don't think any of the companies I was with got more than a few hundred employees. But that puts you on the front lines. You do a lot of the paperwork yourself when you're a CFO for companies that small.
Yes.
I have an MBA in finance, a BA in political science. And about 8 years ago, I decided to get involved with nonprofits and got involved with some folks in Orange County, and we started up the California Policy Center. Its main mission is to educate the public about government unions, which are, as we see it, destroying public education and bankrupting our cities and counties and the state, and are really the root cause of most of the problems in California, and you may argue in much of the rest of the country as well. And it's very important to make a distinction between public sector unions and private sector unions.
Yes, they operate under two different sets of rules and have two very different ways of securing the consent and cooperation of their members. We're coming up on the break. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we're with Ed Ring of the California Policy Center, who is discussing with us the impact of the recent Janus decision of the United States Supreme Court. When we come back, he's going to walk us through it. Join us and talk to Ed at 866-870-5752.
If you like what you're hearing and would like to support Radio Free Los Angeles and the California Tax Limitation Committee, please call area code 626-792-1772, 626-792-1772, or kindly visit our website, catlc.net, catlc.net. You can also watch Radio Free Los Angeles on Facebook Live at radiofreela.us.
If you'd like to talk with Radio Free Los Angeles, the phone lines are wide open. 866-870-KRLA. That's 866-870-5752. We're live, local, and here to talk with you. 866-870-KRLA.
All right, Mike Alexander back with you. With our guest tonight, Ed Ring of the California Policy Center, who's going to discuss the recent Janus case with us. Ed, why don't you summarize for our audience, if you would, the facts of the Janus case and why it is significant?
Well, you bet. In the United States, there's about 150 million, I think it's actually up around 160 million now, workers. Now, of those workers, 15 million of them belong to unions, and here's the really staggering number: half of them, it's really neck and neck. Like 7.6 million are private sector union members, and 7.4 million are public sector union members. So there's as many people who are belonging to unions in the public sector as in the entire private sector, which is more than 80% of the workforce. So there's the penetration of unions in the government is far greater than it is in the private sector, and again, they're very different animals. What is Mark Janus, who's a public employee in the state of Illinois, argued, and this was something that Rebecca Friedrichs, a public school teacher in California, had argued.
Yes.
And the court unfortunately deadlocked before they could rule because Justice Scalia died. And so the court was deadlocked at 4-4 in the Friedrichs case. It was the same case, though, basically the same case. What they argued, and Mark Janus now has successfully argued, is that you can't take agency fees from an employee's payment, a paycheck, if they don't want you to. Because what the union had done in the public sector was said, all right, you're working for the government, so you don't have to pay for our political lobbying, and you can get out of that. But you're still going to have to pay for the cost of collective bargaining.
Right.
Well, what they then did, it's very hard to, and this was in the ruling, the justices made this very clear, it's very hard to objectively distinguish every single dime that's spent on politics and advocacy versus every dime that's spent on negotiations and collective bargaining. And in the end, what the unions ultimately were able, almost everywhere, they were able to claim that about 80% of their spending and 80% of their dues, therefore, they're still going to take from you because that's for collective bargaining.
Right.
What Mark Janus argued was, well, everything the union's bargaining about is political because they're arguing about budgets, they're arguing about taxes and welfare, health care, minority rights, affirmative action, hiring policies, work rules, terminations, promotions. They do non-political, quote, lobbying. They do get-out-the-vote drives, which are not considered political. They fund for educational public relations and academic studies, and these are things that are always skewed towards a political agenda.
Right. Now, just to kind of clarify for those of you who are out there and may not have any particular background on this, over the years, it has been held that public employees do not have to belong to a public employee union. However, back in the 70s, there was a case called Abood, which held that even if you don't belong to that union, you still are liable to payment to, or subject to, you still have to pay for the fair share or the value of the services that you have received in collective bargaining. That, in other words, no free rides for public employees who opt out of the unions. And that was the law up until this past week. And as Ed has pointed out, these fees that were still fairly high that were being charged to them purportedly to cover the cost, expense, and the benefit of collective bargaining on wages and so forth, those expenditures are inherently political, and there's no easy way to distinguish them, and hence to require the payment of those dues, to force them, was a violation of Mr. Genes's First Amendment rights. And it was his rights of free association and his rights of free speech, because in effect he was being forced to write a check for speech that he didn't agree with. It wasn't just collective bargaining benefits. It wasn't the free ride that was at issue. It was everything else. Am I correct in stating that, Ed?
That was very well stated. And
Yes.
what happened in this case was basically Abood. The Abood ruling was overturned.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you look at the agenda of government unions, it's almost, it really is common sense. If you think about it, the inherent agenda of a government union is to increase the size of government.
It's to grow government.
Because then you have more members and you have more dues.
Correct.
So that, you know, that gets to the root of the political, you know, character of public sector unions, which makes them very different from private sector unions.
Exactly. As we say here, we have something we've launched with tongue-in-cheek, Principia Politica. And Principia Politica number 1 is that the first job of government, its primary objective, is to grow itself. Number 2, everybody employed by government is by definition a paid partisan political activist, if only involuntarily.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're there to grow this enterprise, just like you're there to grow your business and your enterprise, and I'm here to grow mine. So is everybody. It's just we're required to suspend our belief when it comes to public employees in government and think that they're engaged in some noble undertaking.
Well, you know, some of them, I think a lot of people actually go into government service because they do want to make a contribution. But what happens with these unions is they indoctrinate government employees to believe that they're underpaid, to believe that they could make so much more in the private sector, to perceive the private sector as, you know, easier. And easier to get wealthy, easier to make a lot of money. And then they compare themselves. When you talk about their compensation, they'll point at the CEOs who make, you know, $100 million a year, let's say, because they're running a $100 billion company, and they go, well, look how much they're making.
Right.
When they ought to be comparing themselves to their counterparts in the private sector. You know, everybody wants to help the workers. Everybody wants to live in a system that makes opportunities for, you know, for you and me, for ordinary workers, to have a better chance to get by. But the public sector unions are so different because they're, you know, it's just so important. You have to belabor this a little bit, because when you think about how a government union prospers, it's perverse. When there's failure, when government programs fail, you need more government, and the unions are right there buying the politicians, saying, let's raise taxes and let's grow government some more and throw more money at it. And the more they fail, the more they want to expand the government. And if you have chaos in society, for whatever reason it is, for example, unrestricted immigration of destitute, unassimilable people instead of merit-based immigration, which type of immigration is going to require less government? The people who have skills and professions, or the people who are destitute and really don't want to be part of our society or our culture anyway? Who's going to cost more government services?
Exactly. And you know, what you and I are doing here right now, and what you and I have had the opportunity to do many times in the past in private conversations, is to take basic common sense business and economic analysis and employ it in looking at government and at the public employee unions. And it's only common sense. That's why my view of all these little illegal kids that are making their way across the board by whatever border by whatever it means is that essentially they represent cash flow to the public employee unions.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, those kids are worth a hell of a lot of money.
But the problem is when you have a unionized government, you're not looking at the problem objectively, and you're not looking at the problem in a way that's going to look out for the interests of Americans. And frankly, you know, it's an exercise in futility to try to solve the problems in these troubled foreign nations. You're only going to, even if we took tens of millions of them in, it would be a drop in the bucket. You would not solve the problems in those nations.
Right.
You would only create problems in ours. But the unions don't care, because if things fail, if there's social chaos, they get to have more laws, more bureaucracies, more agencies, more employees, more dues, more power.
That's right. Exactly. You know, no matter what, government grows, and now we are on the cusp of unprecedented fiscal debt. That's not even all of our unfunded liabilities, but unprecedented fiscal debt, which may soon equal the entire United States gross domestic product. So we're closing in on $20+ trillion, and I'm trying to remember what the U.S. gross domestic product is, but I think it's maybe around 25 trillion. So
that would be my guess as well, the low 20s now.
So so we're now approaching 100%, and the guys that look at these sorts of things will tell us that that's the tipping point. That's
remember, Michael, that's just federal debt as well.
Yes.
And when you look at California, you're looking at a pretty bad case of debt just in our state. We looked at this a few times in recent years, and if you take the unfunded pension liabilities using realistic assumptions, not the official numbers, and if you look at all of the bonded indebtedness, you're at about $1.3 trillion. California's economy is about, I don't know, $2.5 trillion, maybe a little more than that now.
That's correct.
So, we're up to about 50% of our own state GDP with debt. So there's hard choices that need to be made, and the problem is government unions distort the entire discussion, especially in California, cities, counties, and in the state legislature. These unions collect and spend, just here in California and just the public sector unions, over $1 billion every year. That's $2 billion every election cycle.
That's correct.
And just the amount that they declare as political spending, which is about 25%, that they'll officially acknowledge we spent this on politics. Well, think about that. Every election cycle, that's $500 million.
That's right.
And if you look at who's going to oppose these unions, you'll find there's really nobody lining up for a variety of reasons. You have left-wing oligarchs in California. There's 500, according to Forbes magazine, there's 540 billion in California.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them, unfortunately, though, are left-wing billionaires. And the left-wing billionaires are the ones that they go to the legislature. They don't even have to go to the politicians. They go to the major unions and they say, here's the legislation we're working on. Let's make a deal. How does this work? Now, and this of course is what a lot of California's corporations do too. what people on the left don't understand is
Hey,
that business
Ed,
is
I
politically
want you to hold your excellent points there. I really want to tackle how that goes. We're coming up on a break now. We're with Ed Ring of the California Policy Center discussing the Janus decision and the larger implications for our state and particularly these vicious public employee unions. Join us here. Give us a call. We'll be back after the break. Call us at 866-870-5752.
Come in, Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
Okay. All right, there we are. I got my microphone now. This is Mike Alexander back with you. We have Ed Ring of the California Policy Center here talking about the Janus decision. And we're going to hold him over here into the rest of this half hour. This subject is so important, so seminal. We want you to get your minds around it. Ed, when we finished the last half hour, you were talking about the relationship of these unions to the budgets and how the unions line up with other special interests, big business, very wealthy people, to cut deals. Why don't you continue your comments on that?
Yeah, I should watch the clock. It's just such an overwhelming topic. And
Yes.
I think, as you say, we were talking about how I think a lot of, there's a lot of people with good hearts on both sides. And left-wing activists, though, really, especially those who defend government unions, they should remember that business is politically neutral. Business will make peace with whoever's in power.
Mm-hmm.
And that's especially true in California. What you've got are foundations that themselves are funded by these businesses. You've got wealthy billionaires who have founded or run these businesses. So they're all in a position where they go to California's legislature. They're not going to say, let's get rid of the unions. They're not going to donate money to political campaigns to support politicians who want to challenge these unions, because they're going to be targeted. And this has happened. There has been situations. The differences are unions in the government elect their bosses, and then those bosses turn around and can actually they're running the machinery of government. They're populating the bureaucracies. They can target and engage in retaliatory legislation or harassment of anybody who's a well-to-do political opponent. So we can sit here and talk about it, but to get serious backing from people with the kind of wealth and means to support public education campaigns and political campaigns to dethrone these unions is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I will say it's impossible. And that's why we have launched the California Taxpayers Union. I don't think, Ed, that anybody's going to do this job for us. When we look at the Republican Party, which is where most conservatives used to look for help in pushing back big government, getting tax relief, getting relief from regulations, when we look at what happened with them, with all of their supposed connections to big business, that party just dried up and blew away. I don't even know if they have meetings anymore.
Well, they couldn't even find somebody to endorse for senator, and it's possible that if they'd lined up somewhere, instead of seeing De Leon Feinstein in November on the ballot, we would have seen a Republican. I think they could have done that. I became disillusioned when they didn't back up Arnold Schwarzenegger's 4 reforms: a balanced budget, redistricting, teacher tenure, and paycheck protection, which was what this case finally did. It lets you stop paying the dues.
Correct.
Schwarzenegger was doing the right things the first year of his government.
I never saw a better. We all, so many conservatives rightly criticize the later Schwarzenegger, but the earlier Schwarzenegger, who ran for office, we can all remember what he ran against car registration.
Yeah.
And he have that long Austrian drawl. He said, whatever the problem is in government, it's always tax, 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 tax.
He was very outspoken.
Oh, he was wonderful.
Sector unions, and the Republicans turned their back on him.
They did.
And ran for cover. I will say, I believe, Michael, and I'll bet you would probably agree,
yes.
The Democrats are worse.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they are. Oh, I mean, they're the difference between someone who is morally corrupt and somebody who's engages in prostitution for money. These are pros. There's no question about it. When we look at this unholy alliance, we understand what's going on. Now, when I read your article there, I don't know if it was yours or that other person, Reese, but I think it was your article was CPC. Kelly McGee was the other lady who wrote there. But you were talking about 2% targeting. That the unions try to target about 2% of gross compensation of their members for their union dues. Is that correct?
It's usually around 2%. That's correct.
Yeah, and that which is interesting because you and I have talked about these numbers, how hard the information is to get. Mm-hmm. But if that is their real rule of thumb, we might be able to get a better handle on what total union dues are in this state, and it might surprise even you and me.
Well, in the public sector, we looked at the total membership here in California, which here's the thing: you have more disclosure for publicly traded corporations and for private sector unions. In both of those cases, you get a lot more information on their revenue and where their money's being spent than you can with public sector unions. And it ought to be the other way around, but it's not. So
right.
You have to look at census data. You have to look at academic studies. You get a host of different pieces of evidence. You put it together. It's over $1 billion a year. It's about $1.1 billion a year just here in California for the public unions. And the thing is, politics on the right of center, politics with people who want limited government, is chaotic. You have to go out, with your hand out,
yes.
you get a grassroots fundraising, wealthy individuals, foundations, corporations, you fundraise wherever you can, and you have to ask for the money. People decide whether or not they want to support what your cause is and what you're fighting for. And they make that decision, and you do your best, and then you go back and ask for some more. But that's the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately,
right.
on the other side, it's not. They're getting all of this union money. It's extremely partisan. It's 95 to 99% is going to Democrats.
Yes.
And more progressive Democrats all the time.
That's right. And the big money, the big corporate money, instead of lining up through the Republican Party, as the Democrat propaganda likes to suggest, that big corporate money is actually being coordinated with the union money in the Democrat Party. And ultimately, they together form not the Democrat Party or the Republican Party or anything in between, but the one party.
Yeah, I've heard it called the Uniparty.
The Uniparty, absolutely. So anybody who's talking about Democrat or Republican just isn't paying attention. Those labels are real enough. They do describe something, but they're by no means accurately descriptive. I want to go back to the one thing you said. How is it ultimately that we oppose this? My view is that we need to start a union of our own, which we have, and that if you look at that, what you just talked about, and you're a numbers guy, that you've lived that life, you know that their secret is not so much their business model as their revenue model. And their revenue, means that each month, every year, that money is coming in. We need a system on our side where that same thing is happening, to where our contributors are contributing money to an organization that is acting strategically and consistently. And I believe that if we, I'm not inviting your support one way or the other for the idea. I'm just arguing what it is that we're doing. But if we bring that money in and we behave consistently and strategically, we can actually attack them. And it's not going to take us $1 billion in dues to undo them. We see their extremely poor performance up against Trump. We see how narrowly they eke out victory here and there. Even Barack Obama barely made it. When he ran both times. It's always been closer. Of course, the other fact is that Donald Trump's election was a lot closer than he likes to talk about. It was a movement of a few 100,000 votes here and there would have meant a Democrat president. But the fact is that with all the money that the Democrats have and the public employee unions, it never should have been that close. Not in 2008, not in 2012, and not in 2016. It should have been a walk away. How much time do we have now?
1 minute.
We got 1 minute to go. When we come back, we've got Mike from El Segundo that wants to talk about taxes. And Brooke, if you would, please check and see if he wants to talk with Ed, because I'd like to keep the focus on Ed. We're raising a subject here, and I hope you come back many times. We'll be back here in just a minute. This is Mike Alexander, Radio Free Los Angeles at 866-870-5752. And this is listener-sponsored radio, so go to radiofreelosangeles.net, all spelled out, radiofreelosangeles.net. Make a contribution. Keep this wonderful program going. Back with you after the break.
If you like what you're hearing and would like to support Radio Free Los Angeles and the California Tax Limitation Committee, please call area code 626-792-1772, 626-792-1772, or kindly visit our website, catlc.net, catlc.net. You can also watch Radio Free Los Angeles on Facebook Live at radiofreela.us.
If you'd like to talk with Radio Free Los Angeles, the phone lines are wide open. 866-870-KRLA. That's 866-870-5752. We're live, local, and here to talk with you. 866-870-KRLA.
All right, Patriots. Back with you here, Mike Alexander, Radio Free Los Angeles. And we're right here behind the Iron Curtain in Glendale, California, talking with Ed Ring of the California Policy Center, not only about the Janus decision, but about public employee unions in California in general. Right now we have Mike from El Segundo who would like to make a few comments and talk with Ed. Mike, fire away. We've had you on before. You're a former city councilman, are you not?
I was, not anymore. I served one term and then special interest.
One and done.
Yeah, well, the special interest, when you're honest and you represent the voters and taxpayers and business people, do it honestly. Some special interests don't want you in there. They want to get you out, and get someone in there who'll do their bidding for them, even, when it works against the voters and taxpayers. And that's part of the problem is that unions, especially government employee unions, create a huge concentration of power. And as you know, the founders, when they wrote the Constitution, tried to divide up the power and limit the powers. And they knew that, as Lord Acton said, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the government employee unions have absolutely corrupted our state government and many of the local governments. One of the questions I had was, are union dues tax deductible? And if they are, I believe they should not be, because a lot of that union money is used for political purposes, and it's probably impossible to find out the truth as to how much the unions are actually spending on politics.
Yeah. Ed, what's your take on that? Union dues deductible or not?
You can deduct up to 2% of your adjusted gross income.
There you go.
See, I think that's terrible because a lot. Do the union members have to find out how much of the union dues are being spent on politics and then not count that in their tax deduction? Or are they even allowed to deduct from their taxes the portion of union dues spent on political campaigns?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask a better accountant than me, but there's a lot of loopholes relating to union dues. I mean, the fact that you can deduct them when, let's say, for example, you can't deduct the political portion, just as the Janus ruling established, well, wait a minute, you can't really draw a line between what spending is political and what spending isn't. So, they're claiming 80% of it is not political. That's what Janus finally has now empowered employees to stop paying that piece of it as well. But you're going to get the 80% deducted no matter what if it's represented successfully as collective bargaining and not politics.
That confirmation of political reality, that acknowledgement of how politics really works on the part of the Supreme Court was as important as the holding itself. It just really lays it all out there. And I'm with you, Mike. Why should you be able to devote 2% if the U.S. Supreme Court has said, well, it's impossible to segregate political from non-political spending? It's all politics because it's inherently mixed in. Not a dime of it should be deductible. Or we can give a 2% deduction, political deduction, to everybody else. That might make life very interesting. Level that playing.
Yeah, I have another question related to the Janus decision.
Yes.
As I understand it, that only affected government employee unions. I'm wondering, was that because the plaintiff was a government employee and the context was a government employee union? And if so, what are the chances that a conservative Supreme Court would issue the same ruling for private sector unions?
Well, that's the right to work argument. The free speech argument, which Mark Janus argued, is inherently restricted to the public sector because when you look at public sector budgets and public sector work rules and so on, you really are talking about a political activity, whereas if you look at a private corporation's budget or their how they run their organizations, that's not political.
Right. So even if the public employee unions are deemed a private, non-governmental institution, the fact is that the public entities were publicly using the government power to enforce private contractual provisions that violated the First Amendment. These are not unlike enforcing racial covenants in the courts, which would be illegal if the courts did them, but or at least back in the day they argued that they were okay because they were private. All of these things have been rejected. In the private area there, Mike, I believe that not only are private employers not governments and therefore not vulnerable to this line of argumentation, but in addition, the formation of those unions are following a vote. They're subject to different regulation, Taft-Hartley, and a bunch of other things. So there's a whole different schema of regulation that applies to private unions. And like Ed, I don't know that much about it, but it's going to be a very interesting next couple of years.
Mike, as a city council member, you may find this interesting. I think it's the last piece of this whole Janus ruling that's worth talking about is that it was a strong ruling because we were afraid that they would say, you don't have to pay the agency fees, you don't have to pay any dues, but you have to go to the union and ask them to stop withholding the money. And instead, they went to an opt-in model in this ruling. They said that the employee has to give the employee's affirmative consent to the union. The union has to ask for the money. And I don't want to leave this hour without explaining how thoroughly California's legislature, controlled by these unions, has worked to circumvent even that aggressive ruling. What they're saying is that they've put together contracts where if you join the public sector, you waive your right to free speech. You waive your right to get out. They basically say if you're willing to join the union initially, from then on you can ask to quit, but they don't have to come to you once a year and see if you want to stay a member. You have to go to them. And then they've established a very narrow window with a lot of bureaucratic hoops you have to jump through, which was the same thing they did for political dues. Now they're doing it for all the dues. In other words, they've rigged the work rules and the contractual understandings they have with the employees to make it very hard to get out of these unions, even though you now have the right to do that. They've even made it where you can't go to your payroll department and say, I don't want to have these dues withheld anymore. You have to go to the unions only once a year at a certain time of year, file all the right forms, and then if the union approves your application to quit, the union will contact the city and say, okay, stop withholding that money.
Right.
And if you miss the deadline, you have to pay for another year. And this goes back to the funding, because these kinds of contracts that they're ramming through and these laws that they've rammed through the legislature can be challenged. They're not, but that will take millions and millions of dollars, and the unions have those tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. Our side does not.
And they even
hang
on, Mike. Oh, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Okay. I just have one more question on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. Fire away.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. What about if the union contract has a clause, and I believe the El Segundo Police and or Firefighters Union had a clause like that, I don't know if they still do, which says that if someone does not want to join the union, they still have to pay an amount of money equal to the union dues that has to go to some organization, presumably a charity, maybe a politically active charity, that I think the employee can choose among 2 or 3 that the union puts on a list. So would the union still be able to do that based on this recent Supreme Court decision?
Well, I don't think that they can make you pay anything. I remember the choose charity option, and we've looked at that with teachers. There's been a movement to try to get teachers to allocate their dues to a charity instead. It's hard to do, but I think this ruling goes past that. I mean, at this point, you don't have to pay anything, so you don't have to allocate it to a charity. You can keep it.
Right.
So what they're focusing on is making it hard to keep. They say, I'm reading from a contract. It says, if you sign something allowing them to deduct the dues, it then says, if I rescind my membership, I agree that the contributions authorized shall continue and shall automatically renew annually unless I submit a timely signed revocation of this authorization. Now, I'm reading straight off of a contract that was being used for a union in Orange County.
Right.
That's what they're doing all over the state.
Right. You try doing that in an automobile financing contract, and you'll come up short with the state. Mike, we want to thank you for calling in. What are we at about 1 minute now, Josh? I don't want to leave this hour without a special thanks to Ed Ring. Ed, you and I have just scratched the surface. These are big issues. I want to come back to you time and again, particularly on school choice that we're going to get so much behind. And this business that Ed has written about, and he writes about it again and again and again. Go to CaliforniaPolicyCenter.org, and if you want a special briefing, go to last Wednesday. I think June 27th was when Ed's article came out. and it came out, I think, a day or so before the decision. So your observations were both accurate and prescient in this area. You're one of the smart guys. You're one of the good guys, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate you coming on, Ed.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Let's do it again, my friend. I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. God bless. All right, this is Radio Free Los Angeles. Mike Alexander, your host, here behind the Iron Curtain. Our telephone number is 866-870-5752, and we'll be back after the 9 o'clock break here.
And good.
Come in, Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
All right, patriots out there, again, a happy 4th of July coming up here in the next couple of days. And I want to give my regards to Jonathan Wilson. He's not with us here tonight. I don't know if he's calling in from Kentucky or not. It's after midnight. Heck, he's probably into a second bottle if he's really enjoying that good weather. Bourbon down there. Boy, I tell you, that's good country. We look forward to having him back with us here next Sunday night. Yeah, we had just a wonderful hour there with Ed Ring talking about the public employee unions and, more importantly, how politics really works in this state. I can't tell you how often I talk with conservatives, so many Republicans and independents who focus so entirely on ideology, as if all we had to do was to get a better set of arguments to deploy against our political adversaries and things would take care of themselves. As if all we had to do was to make a mobster realize the error of his ways. So give him a sermon, he'll stop stealing, stop killing, stop his gambling and prostitution activities. It doesn't work that way, and it doesn't work that way in politics. Now, ideology is important. Ideas are important because we do need to persuade our fellow citizens. But before we can do that, we really need to understand how politics operates. And Ed Ring and I, in the last hour, I hope made some progress with you in explaining how politics runs here in this state. And the fact is that the public employee unions take in vast amounts of money. They reinvest it tactically and strategically in electing their own bosses. That is, they elect city councilmen, county supervisors, and members of the California legislature, and yes, the federal legislature, Congress, and the Senate. They elect people who are going to turn around and grow government, hire more of them, pay them more, and pay them more benefits. That's what's working here. So whenever we see somebody in a program, whether it's better, so-called better education or more welfare or more help for this poor person or that's the hook. That's the advertising. That's the propaganda. But what's behind it all is a ruthless, cynical attempt to grow government. And when we look at the numbers, and let's review what Ed went over, because these are critical numbers. In the United States, you have maybe 160 million people in the workforce, and of them, about 10% are about 16 million, a little over 16 million, are members of unions. And it splits between the private and the public employee unions. So when you look at that nationwide, we have several million public employees. We're probably looking at over 10 million of them who are in unions throughout the United States. That is a huge number, and they pay dues. Oh yeah, but those union dues in the public employee unions are not the same as they are in private unions. Those monies are highly political in character, and the Supreme Court, in writing that decision this past week, made that very clear, that there's no easy way to distinguish which portion of the union dues are being spent on politics versus just purely representing public employees and getting higher wages. Even the higher wages being sought are inherently political and constitute an inherently political issue because that money is being sought from a local or state government. That's just the plain fact of the matter. And that's why we say here at Radio Free Los Angeles that the first job of government is to grow itself. And every person in there is engaged in that. That's why we also say here that every public employee is ultimately to be regarded as a paid, partisan, political activist. They are there to grow government, and boy, have they grown government. You and I tend to look at it as a matter of efficiency. It is a mistake to look at their business the way that you look at any other business. Their business is just fine. Their business is, in fact, the single most successful business in the United States. They hijack over half of the net income of the people and the taxpayers in this nation and redistribute the wealth. They take a huge chunk for themselves. And that's what we call public pensions in this state. And when you look at how many people are there and what they're pouring into the dues each year, and let's go back to what the numbers that Ed and I discussed. He estimates the dues at $1.1 billion. That's been my estimate. We've talked about that number many times, but it's $1 billion a year. And when you look at that $1 billion a year, you can see that it was never about the billionaires. It was never about Soros. It was all about Sally. And I want to tell you about Sally now that I have your attention. I tell this story sometimes at political gatherings where we're talking about the issues that confront our great state, where we talk about how we're going to make California golden again. And I point out to the concerned Californian how important it is that they contribute and become a regular contributing member of the California Taxpayers Union. And I compare and contrast us to the other side. And one of the, shall we say, rhetorical devices that I use is Sally and Sally's first day at school. And as the story goes, Sally just got up today and she's getting herself ready because this is her first day at school. Sally graduated a year or so ago from college and managed to get her teaching certificate. She passed her board's examinations. She applied around, and today she finally got hired and is going to her first day at school. And if we look at Sally carefully as we watch her getting ready, we realize that her clothes, she got her best clothes on, but they're not new because Sally doesn't have any money. Sally has student debt. Sally doesn't come from comfortable circumstances. In fact, she's still living at home because Sally doesn't have any money. Sally goes out and gets into a car. It's an older car, and it's one that her dad helps her to keep working because she can't afford to buy a new car because Sally doesn't have any money. She needs to work. Today's her first day at school. So Sally in her best hairdo and her best kept older clothes, gets into that used car, makes her way down to the school. She checks in with security, finally gets to the office, and presents herself. Who are you? Yes, my name's Sally, and today's my first day at school. And so the school secretary gives her some paperwork to fill out, says, here, go fill out these forms, sit down, somebody will be with you in a moment. And so she does. So Sally sits over there and waits, and finally somebody comes out. Now, who do you suppose it was? Do you think it was the school principal? I don't know. How about the vice principal? How about her mentor, the one who's going to tutor her through her first days in school? No, you guessed it. It was a union representative. And she tries to hand him these papers. He tells her to throw that garbage away. Here's the only thing you need to know. It's a union membership, and she promises to pay $1,000 a year for the next 30 years.
1 minute.
Sally doesn't have any money. Sally is broke. Sally has older clothes. Sally hasn't earned a paycheck yet. She has an old car. She can't afford a new one. She got loads of student debt. But even though she doesn't have any money, Sally agrees right then and there to pay $30,000 in political contributions. They call them union dues, of course, over the next 30 years. And that is what we're up against. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not up against Soros. We're up against Sally. And when you look at the numbers that Ed and I were talking about, how much flows into the union coffers each year, you realize, as I do, it was never about Soros. It was always about Sally. Soros and the wealthy Democrat contributors are a distraction. It is your average public employee who is the secret of their success, and our only alternative is to form a union of our own and contribute just as much and just as regularly as they do. If we do that, we win. If we don't do that, they continue to win.
If you like what you're hearing and would like to support Radio Free
Bill
Los
Drake would have been
Angeles
proud.
and the California Tax Limitation Committee, please call
Post.
area code 626-792-1772.
No, that was perfect. That was a perfect bit.
626-792-1772. Or kindly visit our website,
I love it.
catlc.net.
Take that, Julie.
catlc.net. You can also watch Radio Free Los Angeles on Facebook Live at radiofreela.us.
If you'd like to talk with Radio Free Los Angeles, the phone lines are wide open. 866-870-KRLA. That's 866-870-5752. We're live, local, and here to talk with you. 866-870-KRLA.
All right, here we are back with you. Mike Alexander, Radio Free Los Angeles. And listening to that music from Patton always makes me sit up a little straighter and get ready to do battle with the enemy. You know, we are up against a very different type of challenge here in our country, but the left and runaway government have visited upon our country the kind of damage and destruction and disunity that Tojo and Hitler and Mussolini and 100 other tyrants that we faced in our history could only dream of. Only liberalism, only the destruction of our country on the installment plan. That's what union dues are. They are the installment plan for the destruction of the United States of America. And that money keeps flowing in each and every week under their control. And right now we have no response to it. Now, my proposal is very simple. What we can't, and that is that we can't beat their union without one of our own. That is, what we need is our own response, our own political response, our own political organization that is collecting money just as regularly, just as deliberately, just as reliably, and political action. And that strategic political action must be action that actually places pressure on their system and forces them to defend their position. We need to get pension reform here in the state of California. I think Carl DeMaio is going to be working on that next. I know I've talked with a number of people in this state about reforming our terrible system right now, which is, Ed and I talked about, is about $1.3 trillion in the hole, and that's just through maybe the end of 2016. The fact is that none of those clowns knows just how underwater this whole system is. It's damn near impossible to calculate. It is so bad. That's why we all have to get out of the pension business. So one of the first orders of business for the California Taxpayers Union is going to be to work with other groups to reform our pension system and eliminate what they call the defined benefit, this guaranteed lifetime pension. You and I talk about it all the time. The second thing that we're going to do, and this is more important than the first, and that is what we call school choice. That is, we must eliminate the public school monopoly. They are not only no good at their job, they are positively destructive of our society and our culture. We have to face up to the fact that we have imported hundreds of thousands, probably several million people from other parts of this world, and we have no plan for assimilation. Now, once upon a time, at least there was a common culture that was being communicated through our public schools during that era, but that is no more. Right now, we bring people from other countries with no history of liberty, no tradition of democracy, no understanding of what is required for self-government. We plug them into our society, and assuming that they're all good, nice, honest people, they still are clueless as to what to do. So how are they going to assimilate? Well, our plan for assimilation is to turn them over to the enemy, who tell them that you and I are the problem, that they are the solution, and all they need to do is to vote. And I guess that's why my brother made a remark here yesterday, something to the effect that the family that migrates together votes together. It was something on that order, and that's what their plan is. Bring more people here, spend more money, grab more power, reduce our liberties, take our property, and consign us to the dustbin of history. That's what they're up to, ladies and gentlemen. And that public school is nothing more than a liberal left-wing madrasa out there, which is teaching everybody the wrong things. And we not only have to take our the immigrants that are coming into our country and re-educate them. We need to take the citizens of our country, get them out of these cesspools that they call public schools, and get them into institutions that will teach them the American way. And most importantly, I want you to focus on this. Most importantly, what will happen is that families will be placed in charge of their children's education. And that proposal is very simple. The Educational Savings Account System. Every year in August, each child in the state of California will receive his pro rata participation in state spending. That'll be about $10,000 to $11,000. That goes into a savings account that can only be used for education. His parents will then have the right to determine where that child goes to school. They can go to any school that they want, a school of their choice, not the government's. It can be the local public school. It can be a charter school. It can be a private school or even a parochial school, your local Catholic school, your synagogue school, your Hebrew school, wherever it is that you're sending people to. Those are places where you can spend your educational dollar. You can add some more money to it, Or you can negotiate a good price on tuition, thereby introducing price competition into education for the first time, and then save that money and use it for other kinds of qualified expenses like music and whatnot, or just save it and spend it in college. It is a tremendous alternative in this state, and if you don't think that that's attractive, I invite you in my audience. I know a lot of you tend to be older people with no kids out there, but I invite you, when you're standing in that grocery line, talk to the clerk, talk to the young family behind you, and ask them if they would be interested in such a problem. And I'm telling you from my own personal experience, their faces light up, because believe me, they want out of that local public school. They're as tired of dealing with those public employees as you are, because they're just there for themselves. And I don't want a bunch of teachers calling me, telling me how much they care. I'm in no mood for it. Not tonight. You probably don't listen to this station anyway. Good riddance. This whole thing with public schools is just a joke. And despite all the money that we've spent, the public schools here in the state of California are 48th, right? And the Los Angeles Unified so-called School District is right at the bottom of the entire mess. And believe it or not, they probably spend per child in the Los Angeles Unified School District probably $25,000 or more per year per child, and look what they get, a massive dropout rate. You know what you need to do. I want you to go to radiofreelosangeles.net. I want you to give a listener contribution. Then I want you to communicate with us at send us a note on Facebook at radiofreelosangeles.us, or call in, leave us your name and number. Let's get you signed up with the California Employees, ouch, I misspoke, the California Taxpayers Union. All right, now, how many more minutes do we have in there, Josh? All right, we got 5 minutes here. I'm going to, why don't you give me, we'll do our Government Grifter of the Week report here. Do you got any music for me? That's right. Look up. Just let me know when it's ready. Tonight we're going to take a little bit longer to do our Government Grifter of the Week award here by looking at the city of Alhambra. And after everything that you heard Ed talk about, you will understand some of these numbers a little bit better. It shows you just how much they pay themselves. Then on top of this, they're able to earn 30 up to 90% of their compensation, and that pays out to them for a lifetime, and then to the widow for the rest of her lifetime. And when you look at these salaries and benefits, and you consider the fact that the average salary and benefits for the average government employee, full-time that is, here in the state of California, is north of $120,000. When you know that, you'll know why small cities like Sierra Madre, San Marino, and large cities like the city of Los Angeles or like the county of Los Angeles. We got music here. But a little louder. There we are. Good. I love it. I feel like I'm at the Music Center. I'm Bob Hope. Right, I'm Billy Crystal. I'm ready to go. All right, it's time.
What's that dress you're wearing?
I know. So we have the Government Grifter of the Week. Where this week is the city of Alhambra. And it just isn't the same without you out here, Jonathan. You own it. All right, so now we have the Alhambra, and it starts off with the city manager, or as I like to call him, the city mismanager. And this guy runs a small city in the San Gabriel Valley, and his annual compensation is $356,000. Right? Now that's about no drum roll yet. I'll let you know when we ask for the card. You take the music down here for a bit. All right, so we've got $356,000 a year for the assistant manager. But you know it's not easy to mismanage a city. You need help. All right, so they have an assistant city mismanager who rakes in $221,000 a year. Now, that guy is overworked. To mismanage a city of that size, you need executive assistants. So he hired himself an executive assistant to the city manager, and that guy makes makes $100,942 a year. So altogether there, let's add it up real quick. Get up my Obama phone calculator here. We've got 300, 500, 600, 620, 670, almost $700,000 a year to mismanage the city of Alhambra. Now, if we go down to the bottom, we'll see if Marcy, and thank you, Marcy, for putting all this together. I don't know if you gave me
2 minutes.
If you gave me the numbers here. Oh yeah, their population is 84,000, and their current underfunded pension debt is $101 million that they owe down there. That's CalPERS' phony number. The real number is $372,000. And you only, Kaching is right. And you got their library director, library services manager. I mean, they're just library 1, 2, 3, 4. They got more librarians down there than they've got meter maids. And they're all making $100,000. What we got, 30 seconds?
1 minute.
Huh? 1 minute? All right, we got it. I want to read some more of these things. Director of Community Services at $181,000 a year. Deputies, oh my God. Environmental Resources Director, what the hell is that? But he makes $174,000 a year. And don't forget the heartbeat of the city, the code enforcement people, 119, 101. All right, street maze, automotive mechanic, 104,000. Asian services coordinator at 99,000. All right, drum roll, please. I'll have the envelope here. And the winner is Government Grifter of the Week would be is a tie between the automotive mechanic down there at 104,000 and the Asian services coordinator at 99,000. It just doesn't end, and they have no intention of ever ending it. And that's why this show will be on next week and each week thereafter till we get at this problem. I want to thank you for joining me. Tune in next week. Go to RadioFreeLosAngeles.net. Go there. Give us a little love. Be part of the listener-sponsored radio program that's one of the fastest-growing programs in conservative radio here. See you next week.